Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for checking it out if you're new. Doctor Who, Series 14, Season 1, Episode 8, Empire of Death. This is our season finale, the final episode of this season before we go on hiatus for the Christmas special. And boy, was this episode a mess. Yeah, you might notice that my notes here that I've taken throughout, I've watched the episode twice now, and my notes while I've watched it get a little less positive as we go on. You'll see. Let's get right on into it, looking at the episode as it plays out. So right off the bat, we've got no cold open. We go immediately into the previously on and then the theme song, and then the episode opens and we get right into it. There's not any wasted time. Sutekh releases the dust of death, and this is the Thanos dust from Infinity War to simplify it. The dust goes out and anyone it touches, they die instantly. They decay down to their skeleton and then into ash, into dust. Which was cool and kind of dark. Like, I actually was kind of worried at the moment, especially because Russell T Davies, before this episode came out, had said that this week's episode would be devastating. And so I was anticipating someone would die. Obviously not like Ruby or the Doctor, but I was most worried about Carla, Ruby's, adoptive mother, or I was worried about Kate, both of which get taken by the dust, and I actually would have believed it might have been permanent had they not killed literally the entire planet and everyone. Like, in that moment when Sutekh, throws the dust into Unit and it kills Kate, I was actually kind of like, oh my god, did they actually kill Kate after all these years? But then once it overcomes the whole planet and kills the universe, I was like, oh, okay, he's gonna undo it. So it was almost a little too big to make it, like, people always talk about high or low stakes, and because you almost made it like, this might sound weird, but at least for me, because it was so big of an event, there were no stakes, because I was like, okay, the Doctor has to undo this. And during this dust wave, we go to Miss Flood and Gran, and that's where things get real weird, because like I said last week, I figured Miss Flood was just an extension of Sutekh and his consciousness, that she would be one of his angels of death, as we learn the Susans are later in the episode. But she talks about, you better pray to your maker, and she says, I had plans. And so clearly she's not Sutekh. She is her own being, as we also see by the end of the episode. And the death wave comes through and kills her and Gran. And so, in the craziness of all this, the Doctor and Mel escape back to Unit, where they encounter a new TARDIS in the time window with Ruby. And basically, because Sutekh has taken control, he's like wrapped himself around the TARDIS we've been following the whole series, and that one's his now. So the Doctor goes into the time window, and again, this is where I kind of like this idea, but the execution's weird because I'm still not clear on the time window. Like I said, I viewed it as like a hologram that you couldn't really like, you're not really going to the past. It's just a vision. It's just a hologram. But the Doctor takes the TARDIS from the Echo, and he says, like, it's the Echo TARDIS. And it's made of memory, because I do think the way he says it is interesting, where he's like, if time is a memory, then memory is a time machine. Which, I kind of get what he's saying there, you use your memory to look back on times before. You're traveling back in time to your yesteryears. But, yeah, like I said, I really like the idea, but the execution is a little off. It's a little funny, and they never really go into it, which, like I said, Doctor Who never does, but in this instance, with it being such a big, like he made this, what happens to this maybe I missed it both times I saw the episode, but what happens to this clone TARDIS? They just, like, leave it in the future when they go to the future, and they never bring it up again. And so I don't love this idea of making the TARDIS over and over again. Like, they did it in the 60th, where he uses his, like, wish from the toy maker to make a second TARDIS, one for 14, one for 15. And I was okay with that. But I don't want to diminish the specialness of the TARDIS by just having it happen over and over again. But before they take this clone TARDIS, they do encounter Sutekh. He does corner them in the time window. And this is where the Doctor introduces him as my greatest enemy, which I think it's funny because the Doctor has so many greatest enemies. There's now Sutekh, there's the Daleks, there's the Cybermen, there's the Master, and I'm sure there are a bunch of classic villains I haven't even met yet who are also his greatest enemy. And I have to admit, I did not, in the week before this, watch Pyramids of Mars. I did watch some recaps of it, so I'm aware of the general thing, but I don't have the full context. And so, the Doctor actually, in the time window, he has this device that shows him directly the footage that they're looking at, and it shows clips from Pyramids of Mars. And the Doctor basically explains what he did with Sutekh pretty well. Like, I was worried. We were all worried about bringing back such an old classic villain that was like, oh, everybody's, people last week were talking about how the cliffhanger didn't hit for them because they didn't know who Sutekh was. And I think they explain it pretty well here. Doctor says, like, I fought him back in the 70s, and I threw him into the time vortex to his future in an effort to essentially kill him. And he shouldn't be here. But Sutekh reveals that instead he made the time vortex his home. And he clung to the side of the TARDIS throughout who knows how long. And I kind of like how ambiguous it is. If we don't know how long he's been there, I would almost like to say since the Pyramids of Mars. Like, he has been here literally the entire time. Because later on we learned that it was all part of his plan. Because he slowly corrupts the TARDIS and is slowly, like, leeching in and taking control. And as we see in this episode, he fully controls it now with Harbinger inside piloting the ship. And I thought it was interesting because I actually thought his plan was pretty cool. Like, it's rushed, but I thought it was a good explanation for the Susan twist of it all. In that Sutekh uses the TARDIS's perception filter and his own power over life and death to create the Susan twist throughout time as the perfect trap for the Doctor. Because, as I said, he's hanging onto the TARDIS, he hears things, he learns things, and he makes the remark about, like, I've learned all of its secrets. And he's talking about Susan, but in that moment, I thought he was going to bring up the Timeless Child stuff / the fob watch that 13 dropped into the TARDIS that has her, like, memories of the Division. But he's referring to Susan, and he says, I purposely did name her Susan. It was a trap for you to think she's your granddaughter. And so they are actually his angels of death. So how we saw the dust of death earlier, they all do that, and they do it everywhere the Doctor has ever landed. Which, as you can imagine, is everywhere. The Doctor goes everywhere. I thought this was a cool plan from a villain. But like I said, also a bit too big and like when the whole universe dies, they have to fix it. And so the Doctor then gets angry. And again, as I've said all season, and Shudigawa is a good Doctor. I like his performance as like this. He's like the happiest we've seen the Doctor in a long time, but also the most emotionally vulnerable and open, which we kind of addressed near the end of the episode. We'll get to that. Damn Sutekh, and he says, I love the line of like, with both of the hearts of the last of the Time Lords, I swear, I will stop you. And he also messes with Sutek a little. Like, you ask him, like, this joy you feel, that's the light. That's what it feels like to be alive. You're living, you're thriving. What's it like to be alive? And for the god of death, he doesn't take that very well. And so they jump into this Echo TARDIS with Ruby and Mel. And it's a combination of every TARDIS before. There's stuff, there's pieces all over. I didn't dissect it, like, scene by scene. There are things, like, there's a handkerchief or a neckerchief that I assume is Mel's, because Mel looks at it like, she is admiring it. And then there are also old Doctor's outfits and their screwdrivers. And so it's this very tiny, because it is just like a makeshift Echo memory TARDIS. And it's barely able to fly, which, again, I guess how I was complaining earlier, how I don't want them to keep doing it. It does seem like this TARDIS, I guess, isn't going to stick around. Like, the Doctor does leave it in the future later in the episode, but I don't think it will ever come back. It almost is like it'll just fall apart and decay and disappear. Because it's barely held together. And so the Doctor uses this intelligent rope he has, and he brings back the gloves from the Christmas special, the like anti-gravity intelligent gloves that can make him heavy or light as a feather. And the Doctor kind of dissects Sutek's plan a little more. Like, for example, he brings up that the perception filter on the TARDIS cast at 66 meters or 73 yards. And so that's why he couldn't perceive the Susans. As I said, every time they landed, Sutek spawned a new one. And what do we know about 73 yards? That things get weird at 73 yards. It's just outside of, like, your ability to perceive what it is. And so Ruby has, like, a feeling, but she can't remember the events of 73 yards. Because remember, that was, like, weird timeline, which, honestly, this bringing up the 73 yards of the TARDIS almost just makes that episode more of an anomaly, which, who knows why that episode even happened, because, as we learn later, it doesn't matter. This doesn't go anywhere, this doesn't mean anything. I for a second there thought they were going to say, like, the woman who was following Ruby was Sutek that she was perceiving, or that it was an angel of death, but it doesn't. How I said during that episode, I thought it was going to be like Ruby is somehow a god of time or something like that, and that was her future self warning herself, like, don't step on the circle. But all of that is just, it means nothing, as confirmed by this episode, as we'll get to. And so, like I said, we're expanding on Sutek's plan here, and the Doctor explains it, as I have, that every time he landed, a Susan spawned, and they are all angels of death, killing the universe over and over again throughout time and space. So nowhere is safe. And like I said earlier, it's crazy that they did this huge universe-ending event after we just had the Flux, last season, not counting the 60th specials. So, the fact that we had half the universe destroyed in the Flux, and then we again have the universe destroyed by Sutek is... The universe can't... How much time has passed? Like, I guess we know it's been at least, like, a year in Ruby and the Doctor's time, so... Woohoo. They've said, like, the 14th Doctor was, like, alive for a week before he bigenerated. So, yeah, it's been a crazy year for the universe. And, of course, the Doctor is devastated because, of course, he feels that guilt. If he indirectly killed the universe, and that's a heavy burden because the Doctor, this has always been kind of fun for the Doctor. Yes, the Doctor is here to help, but they're also just exploring all of time and space for fun with their companions. So to now know that every time, every silly event, every Bridgerton trip or every trip to the Caribbean that he took with his companions, his or her companions, actually spawned an angel of death and killed that sector of the universe is heavy on the Doctor. And of course, Shudigatwa. I saw a tweet where someone said Shudigatwa cries and screams too much this season, that it almost does diminish it. And I can see where you're saying that the Doctor being so emotional almost makes it feel, yeah, he cries at everything, this guy. But I think, like I said, it works because this version of the Doctor is more openly emotional. And I think it also gives the Doctor a chance to almost see that guilt he feels, because we didn't get that in Flux, the last universe-ending event. In Flux, they really quickly brush it over, and that's not Jodie Whittaker's fault, that's the writing. And because they didn't have enough time, they were supposed to be 8 episodes and got cut down to 6. And so, yeah, there wasn't enough time for the Doctor to mourn the Flux or anything like that. And so here, he's able to express just the frustration of he killed the universe. And so then we cut back to Sutek, and we learn that Sutek needs Ruby. He's talking to Harbinger. He's like, we have to find her. She's got the answers. And I'm just going to tell you flat out, this, again, doesn't matter. This is stupid. This goes nowhere. Because at the time it's being played up like, oh, Ruby's mother is what he wants. She must be this crazy, powerful force. And that is what he's after. Because they explain it later in the episode, but it's because he can't see Ruby's mother. Despite having control of the TARDIS, having control of time and space, he cannot see this woman either. And he cannot, when he takes the TARDIS back to that time, as we see in the Echo, he still can't see her. And so it frustrates him that in his conquer of the universe, this is the one answer he doesn't have. And again, I thought this would be Ruby's mother is some kind of god, like the god of life or the god of death, and Sutek was threatened by her, but that's not what happens. So then we have a bit of a time skip, which I thought was a little jarring, but I guess in a scenario like this, where the universe is dead, you want to really show how dire it is. So we skip, I guess I don't know how long it's been for the Doctor. It's clearly been some time, because him, Ruby, and Mel are all exhausted. They go into the future, and they learn that memory and history is dying with Sutek's attack. Kind of like, because, as the Doctor said before with the memory TARDIS, it almost is. History is only what we tell, what we remember, what we make it. And so they say that memory and history have died with Sutek's attack, which I guess could be why they've talked about earlier in the season, where memories and events are changing, and that's because Sutek is slowly killing I don't know. This is all very sloppily and explained very poorly. And so he meets a woman who's afflicted by the death wave, and she kind of explains that it goes through your family line. Like she has this empty cradle that she's kind of speaking to, like there's a baby in it. And I thought, oh, she's grieving, like she's in denial. And then it's revealed, no. Her memories of her child and her child themselves are gone. They've been killed by the death wave. And she says how it works your way up. Like it goes from the daughter to the mother, and then she dies. And again, it was weird. Like it was both a haunting moment for the Doctor to see that woman talking to her empty cradle, and the realization that she's not coping. She's not how sometimes you see people with trauma will attach themselves to something like an empty cradle and talk about the baby as if it's still there. No, she doesn't remember that the baby's gone. And that is dark. And of course the Doctor cries. But I wish the death wave had been maybe this death virus had been explained a little better. So then the Doctor, like I said, goes into the TARDIS, and he, Mel, and Ruby look like shit. They're all exhausted. And the death wave is impacting their memories and history. And so the Doctor can't even remember his past selves or companions. Like, the time window shows more of the Pyramid of Mars with the fourth Doctor and Sarah Jane. Like, Ruby asks who those people are, and he says, I don't know, someone who traveled in the TARDIS at one point. Like, he doesn't even remember it's himself and Sarah Jane, one of his very good friends. And that's when we also see that, like I said, Mel looks like shit because she's sick and tired. And Sutek reaches out to Mel and begins to take control of her. And I love-hate relationship with the way they explained it. They explained that Sutek controls everything dead. And there's death in everything. Like your dead skin, your dead hair follicles. And so Sutek takes control of her through this, which then I asked, what about the Doctor and Ruby? Does their skin or hair not die as well? But, like, you could argue he doesn't want to harm Ruby because he needs the answer of who her mother is. But we then learn, the Doctor explains that Ruby's birth is actually what put Sutek on the attack. Like I said earlier, this really isn't explained until now, but that Sutek wants the answer of why can't I see this woman? I have control of time and space, but I cannot find him. And they say that he's scared of Ruby's mother because of that. Doesn't matter. It doesn't come up later. But I guess for me, we learn later, like I said, that it's because he can't see her. And Ruby wants those answers, and so do we. And this is a lot of information being thrown at us at once. It is very confusing in my opinion. And ultimately, I have to ask, if it was Ruby's birth, well, I guess we technically do know the reason why. It's because that's when Russell T Davies took over the show. But I was going to say, if Ruby's birth is what started Sutek's attack, put him on the offense, why did all this start in Wild Blue Yonder, when the TARDIS started making the sound? Which I guess is when he generated the TARDIS. The first Susan twist was back with Isaac Newton in Mavity. This all started with Mavity. But none of it has answers. It's very vague. On purpose, maybe, or just very bad writing. So then Ruby looks through the time window, and she sees glimpses of the future. We see the Prime Minister from the 73 Yards episode, the one who was going to nuke everything, where now he's forcing everyone must register in the DNA registry by 2046. And they're like, this is how we figure out your mother, Ruby. Your mother would be in those logs. And I have to ask you, why would she be in those logs? Because they haven't been able to locate her for 20 years. Like, I guess they would say that if she's alive and not killed by the death wave, ? Again, how does the death wave work? Is it instantaneous? Is it like the Doctor says it's happening over and over throughout time. Has it not gotten to 2046? No, we know it's gotten to 2046 because 2046 is in shambles when we get there. But, yeah, so I guess they explain it away by Ruby's mother, if she's still alive, would have registered because everybody would have been forced to, and then they'd match it to Ruby's, which is what they do, but it's a mess because we couldn't do that earlier. So like I said, we go to 2046. Ruby and the Doctor have their new fits. Ruby is rocking her Sarah Connor look, and the Doctor's taking off his leather jacket, which I liked this look for Ruby. I wanted to point it out because she looks cool and fun in this outfit. I think they did purposely do it as like this is her. Sarah, not to go all Terminator nerd on you, but that's a story about taking control of your own fate and destiny and time. And so this is now Ruby taking control of her destiny and her fate and her time. But anyways, Carol of the Bells, of course, begins to play, and it starts to snow as they test Ruby's DNA to find her mother. Don't worry, this doesn't get explained. This means it gets explained, but not in a good way. It just does that. And Mel dies and falls under control of Sutek, Which again, I had that moment of like, oh, did they actually just kill her? Like, that was a little anticlimactic if she just died from exhaustion. Like, and so Sutek then captures them. He brings them back to Unit HQ, gloating to the doctor, and he wants Ruby's mother's name, and the doctor's refusing. And that's when, of course, Ruby does the good old, I'll do it. I'll give it to you. My mother's name is on this screen, on the time window device. And so she says, like, I'll trade you my mother's name for the doctor's life. And, of course, she smashes it. And then it's revealed that this was all a trap. The doctor and Ruby knew Mel had died, because earlier it shows a flashback to when, like, the doctor touched Mel's hand or whatever. And he was like, she's cold. You know, she's dead. Rest in peace, Mel. And so then Ruby, literally, this is kind of fucked up. Because, you know, Sutek looks like Anubis, like a big dog. You know, the god of death. The Egyptian god. And so she literally, you know, clips the intelligent rope onto his collar like a leash. And then the doctor whistles and uses the TARDIS. You know, the TARDIS instantly awakens. You know, it was red under Sutek's control. It turns blue and knocks Sutek off. And it zips over to the doctor, back under his control. Which I think is a nice touch. I love when the TARDIS is sentient and how it would still remain loyal to the Doctor, even though it's been corrupted by Sutek. And so Ruby and the Doctor use the intelligent gloves from the Christmas special and the intelligent rope, you know. So basically you can say that Sutek can't break free because it's just so heavy, like they talked with the gloves. And they pull him, and they chain him to the TARDIS, and they strap him to the TARDIS with the rope. And the doctor goes off into the time vortex. And so they're flying into the time vortex. The doors to the TARDIS are open. They got Sutek flapping off the back like a kite. I thought it was cool. I don't love when Doctor Who does big CGI fight, so to say. Like, I was kind of disappointed that Sutek was just a big CGI dog, but it was cool to see the time vortex used in this way, where the time vortex has always been a little ambiguous, like it's the time and space highway that we travel through. And so he's dragging Sutek by the neck through it. And he asks Sutek, like, what happens if you bring death to death? You know, what happens when you kill what is already dead? It comes back to life. Which, it's a little confusing. Like, I kind of took it as Sutek is somehow, because he's being dragged through the time vortex, is killing all the Susans he had spawned over time and space. Or you can just say that by dragging his ass through the vortex, it reverses the effect of all his kills. And so it reverses everything. Everything Sutek did, it brings everybody back. Even Miss Flood comes back and appears to be human. But we'll touch on that later. And something I wanted to note here is the Doctor is sitting there remarking all the planets that come back, like the Ood are back, you know, Earth is back. But I think what's interesting is earlier Mel and the Doctor noted that Skaro died. All the Daleks are dead. And the Doctor doesn't mention Skaro. Like, I was waiting for him to be like, even the Daleks. Like, I have to save even the Daleks. But he doesn't mention the Daleks. He doesn't mention Skaro when he's listing all the planets that have come back. So I am curious if the Daleks are dead again, or are they coming back? Did the Doctor just not mention them? Like, oh yeah, of course we had to bring those guys back. And some people have questioned if this will also be how they bring Gallifrey back. I don't know if they'll bring Gallifrey back again. We can only kill and bring back Gallifrey so many times. And Gallifrey wasn't killed in Sutek's attack. That was the Master. So I don't know if they would bring back Gallifrey, seeing as Sutek didn't do it. But then the Doctor and Ruby are celebrating, and he has the line, which you knew immediately what was coming. He says to her, "We fought a monster, and now I must become a monster." And of course, he gives this remark to Sutek that which I do believe, that if Sutek is death, then the Doctor must be life. The Doctor brings life throughout the galaxy. And so, while Sutek kills, the Doctor saves, which is what the Doctor has always set out to do. The Doctor has always set out to create or save or preserve life as much as he can. And in this way, he says that Sutek wins, because Sutek is too great of a threat, and so the Doctor does kill him by throwing him into the vortex. And I guess you could say, because I also saw some people like, oh, well, he threw him into the vortex last time, and that didn't kill. I think this time it's a little more definitive, because he literally yosses him into, like, he throws him into it, and the TARDIS is going this way, while Sutek's being dissolved by time in the other direction. And of course, the Doctor falls to his knee, he squats down and starts to cry, because he's killed Sutek. And I went back and forth on this moment, because honestly, the Doctor being a killer has always been wishy-washy. Like, especially if you go to Classic Who, the Doctor did not care. Like, the first Doctor is so much... It's funny because I'm watching through some of Classic Who now. I'm trying to watch them in order. I know you could just watch the recommended stories, but I'm watching through the first Doctor. And it is funny because how New Who is so the Doctor does not kill, the Doctor preserves life. And then the first Doctor is just like, Ian, will you just shoot her, please, so we can leave? And so the Doctor being a killer has always been wishy-washy. But I think we've established this season through things like the Bogeyman or the racist on Finetown that this Doctor is against killing. He's very anti-killing. He wants to preserve and save life. The Bogeyman, even though it's a monster, he still wants to preserve it. It's the last of its kind, just like him. The racist of Finetown, he can't just let them die, but he also can't force them to be saved, and that breaks his heart. He can't sacrifice Ruby when it comes time to kill the Cholder in Rogue. So I can see where this version of the Doctor would emotionally struggle with having to kill Sutek in order to save the universe. Meanwhile, 11 or 12 would have thrown that man in no hesitation. So then we're left in the aftermath. They all regroup at Unit, and it's revealed that Susan Triad is still alive, the Susan of the present day. And they basically say that in Sutek's attempt to create death and spread death, he accidentally created life. And so Susan Triad is just out there now. They offer her a job at Unit, so I'm curious if that means she'll be a recurring character. I mean, she's been here all season at this point. But I guess I don't know how much we're going to be visiting Unit in the future. Everyone's fine. Kate's alive, Carla's alive, Morris is alive. And they have this weird sequence that I wanted to touch on. It's so minor that it doesn't matter. But when they're all brought back, Kate and this head Unit guard, who's been in a few episodes, he and Kate hold hands, which was kind of weird, just because why would you throw that in there? And then finally, after all this, Morris's computer goes off, and they have a DNA match for Ruby's mother. We finally have our answer for our season-long mystery. And it's real bad. So, I gotta ask, why are they able to now? Did they steal the DNA search from 2046? Because they haven't been able to find her. They say literally last episode, we've tried everything and we can't find this woman. So, they search her up, and what is she? Is she a god? Is she an alien? Is she a Time Lord? No, she's just some woman. Her name is Louise Allison Miller. She's 35 years old. And she gave birth to Ruby when she was 15 and comes from an abusive household. So that's why she gave Ruby up, so she would be safe. And I don't have a problem necessarily with Ruby's mother being just a normal human. Like, I think the little bit about her being a teenage pregnancy and having to give her baby up to be safe is an actual, like, that's sad, and that's a deep storyline that they don't touch on at all. That they don't, like, it's just kind of mentioned and then we continue to move on. And I don't have a problem with her being a normal person, except that this whole season was about what the hell is Ruby. And she is just human. Everybody asked that too, like, well, if she's just some person, why couldn't we find her? And the doctor explains it away as she's important because we think she's important. So time and your memory of her was changing. And since when does time work like that? Why would it break reality like that? Because it's never before. Like Rose, with Rose's dad, we just went back and we saw him. And it was no big deal. Like, I guess, I don't know. Because, not to keep bringing things back to the first season of his run, but Rose was so curious about her dad. She'd never met her dad. She wanted to know him. But time didn't make him an all-important deity that was so much of a mystery that the god of death even wanted to know who she was. And then they point out, but, oh, in the videotape, Doctor, she was pointing at you, you know, when she did the point. And this was probably the dumbest thing I've ever seen in Doctor Who. And they say, the doctor's like, no, she's not pointing at me. She's pointing at the lamp, you know, at the lamp post. She's pointing at it, and it says Ruby Road. She wanted everyone to know that that was your name. And to that I ask, well, who was she pointing for it to see? Like, there was no one around except, like, unless they're trying to say that the memory / time changed because the doctor was there, she sees the doctor and she's pointing. So she's pointing so that the doctor knows that her daughter's name is Ruby. But again, who, like, you'd leave a note normally. It's it's such a mess. And like I said, I don't have a problem with her being just a woman, but the fact that it was this huge, this is what the season was anchored around, and this is what Sutek wanted. Like I said, the literal god of death could not perceive this woman and destroyed all of time and space to figure it out. And ultimately, it just makes the mystery part of the season feel like a giant waste of time, and it makes no sense. Like, why did we do this? Why was Ruby's mother a mystery? So then, as the doctor does, he takes Ruby in the TARDIS to go see her mother. And the doctor starts to talk about how maybe we should leave her alone, which, again, like I said, I feel like this is a very deep and, you know, very heavy topic, question, discussion to be had in an episode where we didn't just go fight the giant dog god. Like, I feel like this could have been its own episode of finding Ruby's mother. And again, if it wasn't a huge mystery, it would just be, do you talk to her or not? You know, she gave you up, so to say. But Ruby goes in, and she does meet her mother. And I thought the way she introduces herself is good, because how do you just, like, hi, I'm your kid from 20 years ago. Like, she buys a coffee and then sits down at the same table as her mother, and then, you know, the person, you know, calls her name, Ruby, Ruby. The mother looks up. She's like, my name is Ruby. I was named after a road. And the mother immediately recognizes her. And it did kind of get me. Like, I did feel for her. Like, I did feel in this moment. It did feel good to see Ruby and her mother. And her mother immediately starts to apologize. And I like that Ruby wasn't mad about it. So often with these storylines, you have like the why did you give me up and being angry, but instead she says to her, you left me where I was safe. And that was just, I don't know, that hit me where it was. Ruby could have been mad, she could have felt abandoned, but instead she put her instead she understands her mother came from an abusive household. And so she did what was right for Ruby. And so Ruby's first thing to her mother is to let her know, I turned out okay. And so I did really like that moment. I thought it was cute and very heartfelt. And then we cut forward, and Ruby has introduced her mothers to each other. We're sitting back in the Sunday household with Carla, Gran, and now Ruby's mother. And so the doctor arrives in the TARDIS, and Ruby goes in to talk to him, and she's like, we'll go on all our adventures. And, the doctor's very sullen. You know what's coming next. The doctor's very sullen. Ruby explains that it's just for the night. I just want to spend this night with my mom. And they found my birth father, because he doesn't even know I exist. I was sad to see this. I think it's hard because Ruby didn't get a ton of time, because we only had 8 episodes. 9 if you count she's in the Christmas special. So we had 9 episodes with Ruby and the 15th Doctor. And they say they're best friends, and they say they love each other and they're BFFs, but we have huge gaps in their adventures. And so she doesn't want to leave him, but she does want to meet her father and get to know her mother. And so it is that choice of the found family in the Doctor versus her actual family in her mother and father and Carla and Gran. And so he tells her, your life is out there now, and Ruby asks if he'll ever come back for her. And he promises he will. But then she points out that you never went back for Susan. And he says that was a mistake. Maybe he'll find her someday. And honestly, I thought he was going to say that's where he's headed right now. I thought he was going to reveal that, yeah, I'm leaving you here with your family, and it's time for me to go find mine. I know people are mixed on if Susan should come back or not, but I would like to see her come back someday, and so I do like that. And the Doctor acknowledges that Ruby changed him. He talks about family in a positive way because of her. He opens up in general because of her. The Doctor has always been closed off and didn't share about his family before. And you could say that was to keep the canon vague, like how I said in previous episodes. Like, we weren't sure if Susan was biologically his granddaughter or not. And how he says, I don't even know when I, have a child to then have a grandchild. I do like that Ruby changed the Doctor, that her search for family ultimately made him more open to exploring his own family. And so maybe we'll see him next season go off searching for Susan, or maybe he goes off to find timeless child answers. Because we know that the Doctor got spit out of that mysterious vortex and is from an alternate universe wherever. And so I think the Doctor is off to go search for his family. He fixed this family, and now he has to move on. And so Ruby leaves, and she says, I love you. And he doesn't answer. He just cries. And I know there's a lot of ways you can interpret it. You could interpret this as Ruby has fallen in love with him romantically, and he doesn't reciprocate or doesn't want to verbally reciprocate those feelings. I don't think that at all. I think they truly are best friends. Because Ruby is the first person this Doctor met and made a relationship with, outside of 14 and Donna. Like, they don't count. Donna is 14's friend. And so I do fully believe it was a platonic I love you. And so the fact that he doesn't say it back, I think shows that the Doctor isn't there yet. Like, he's not ready to say I love you. It can be hard for some people to say I love you to friends over loved ones. It can be hard for those who are a little emotionally stunted, like he has been for so many years, to say I love you to someone. And also, we know Ruby will be back next season, at least in some capacity. I know there's been rumors that she's only going to be in a couple episodes. There were rumors that she'll be there the whole time. We know there is a new companion. I haven't looked too far into it. There is a, next time on floating around somewhere that I haven't seen. I've seen a snippet of. And so Ruby will be back. But overall, I think this was an okay spot to leave her. It's not the worst ending for a companion, that's for sure. And so then we zoom out, we leave Ruby's apartment, and we go up to the rooftop. And who's up there but Miss Flood in this big winter coat. And she starts speaking to us. So clearly she's not Sutek. She is some kind of her own being. For a minute there, I thought maybe she was Susan, but I don't think she's Susan anymore. I think she is just another entity, another deity, like the toy maker, because she starts narrating and she's like, oh, a happy ending for Ruby. But the Doctor, his story ends in absolute terror. And that's it. That's how we end it. And so who or what is she is a mystery. Some people have pointed out online that she is wearing, I did not notice this at the time and I feel a little silly, but she is wearing the outfits of past companions when we see her. Like, she's in a Clara outfit when she's babysitting Miss Flood. And the big coat she's wearing is the outfit a past companion wore in Classic Who. So I am curious, I almost want to say she's some kind of deity just that's been watching the Doctor. Maybe she's just someone who's interested like us. I don't know. But so yeah, that was the finale of Series 14, Season 1, Episode 8, Empire of Death. Overall, I think it's an okay episode, but a terrible finale. It makes the mystery of Ruby's mom feel like a huge waste of time. It was this big old mystery, and ultimately she was just some woman. And again, her being some woman, I don't have a problem with. It was because it was built up. Why can Ruby make it... it was new rules that we haven't seen in the show before. So when you establish new rules, they have to be clear, and they weren't. It felt like the writers just making it up just because they could. Why did Carol of the Bells and Snow start playing, And it was just because the Doctor said that memory was so powerful. But a lot of people have powerful memories without making it snow or changing the weather. And so that whole mystery was just ruined. The Susan twist explanation was good. I like the Sutek attack and the spawning the Susans. And then overall, it just kind of sloppily ties things together to try to wrap it up for, the finale of it. The bringing up the 73 yards of the perception filter, you'd think it might tie in and explain what happened to Ruby in that episode, but it doesn't. It's just there to bring up the weird things happen at 73 yards, and it's why? Why bring it up? And then trying to tie the mystery of Sutek and Ruby's mom together is just... Why does he care if she's just some random woman? And I know they explain that nobody knew she was just some random woman. But Sutek, this godlike creature who has control of time and space now thanks to the TARDIS, can't get the answer of who Ruby's mom is because just the point in time has become so powerful because so many people are curious about it. You could say it's become a fixed point in time. It's just... It's messy. It's messy. And And then we wrap up a companion in one season, which is never my preference. I love long-running companions. I will always have a special place in my heart for Rose because she was my first companion. I did start at Series 1 with the Ninth Doctor. Amy and Rory are probably my favorite companions. And so they have stuck around for quite a while. But so yeah, overall, I think the one-season companions don't necessarily get enough time to shine and flesh themselves out. Like, you look at Martha or Bill, and they don't have any time. Like, Bill was so fun, and her ending is so tragic. And at least Ruby did get her happy ending. But I want to see more of her. I would like to see her and the Doctor's relationship, which I know the comic starts this week. You know, they really timed that well. But still, it's a bit of a bummer that you'd have to go to outside materials like the comic or Big Finish to figure out more of their adventures. And here's to seeing more of Ruby in Season 2. So, overall, Doctor Who, Series 14, Season 1, I feel like this has been quite a journey with you all watching these videos, watching these reactions / reviews of mine. And I think overall I enjoyed this season. It was way too short, as we've said before. I think this season was overall, the general idea or vibe I would say of this season was a lot of fun one-off adventures, but it was way too short and the connecting plot is just awful, terrible. Like, just ignore that. Like, Rogue, I think Rogue is a very fun episode. I will revisit Rogue in the future. Boom is a good episode. Like, they're all good episodes. Like, I would say I will rewatch this season over again, but maybe I won't watch the finale, or will just ignore the mystery of it all. The adventures themselves are fun, but the connecting storyline was a mess this season. But the performances were great. I really grew to love, and she got one, Millie Gibson, as the Doctor and Ruby. I want to see more of them. I like their chemistry and the way they react. I like that, as they said, this Doctor is more emotionally vulnerable because of Ruby. And so overall, a fun season of Doctor Who. Maybe a bit of a rocky start if this was your first season ever. Definitely go back and check out some of the other stuff. Like, go back to the Ninth Doctor 2 Series 1. Go back and watch 9, 10, 11, 12. And then you can watch 13, and then 14, and then 15. Like I said, Doctor Who is made to pretty much, you can jump on at every new Doctor. Do I think this was the strongest starting place this first season? No. But it was fun. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. In the future, I may or may not continue to do this. We have the Christmas special coming up and Season 2 coming next year. We will see. The BBC loves to copyright claim these Doctor Who videos. So, I guess we'll just have to see what my future self feels like at the time. I told myself I wasn't going to do these reviews, but like I've said, every episode has been so fun that I've wanted to talk about it. And so, I do enjoy the show. I do like Doctor Who. Let me know what you think of this season in the comments down below. If you liked what you saw here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you know when the next one's coming. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.